Hello, welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English, and this week we have a fantastic guest. We have Gregory Rozek, and he's going to be talking about retrograde planets. Now, in 2014, Gregory entered a competition with the Astrological Association, and it was an essay contest. And he submitted an article called People with Many Retrogrades, and it's all about the retrograde planets. And in the contest, the essay contest, he was awarded a prize. So today we're going to learn about them. One, because we've got a whole bunch of them coming up this month, and the other, just the subject itself is very interesting. So welcome, Gregory. How are you feeling today? What's the weather like over in Poland at the moment?
Hello, Mary. I'm feeling quite great because I'm able to speak with you. Weather is quite warm here, so I'll take a walk after this. So should we start or some preliminary information from you?
We're going to be starting by you telling me exactly, what is a retrograde planet. So if you could just tell us a little bit about, so just quite, use it into easy terms, when a planet goes retrograde, exactly what is happening to it. So can you tell us not so much too much about the astronomy, but in astrology, when a planet does that, how does it all happen? What's behind it all? What's the important thing we need to know?
So, yes, like you're saying, astronomy is quite complicated, and it's one of those parts of astrology or reading a chart, where you need to use them every time, to see, because planet is either going in the usual direction, which is called going forward yeah, or direct, and sometimes they go retrograde. So it seems like if we would look at the sky at night and compare the planet's path to the stars, we would see that, suddenly Mars is going the other direction than it used to go, or when the sun goes, the moon goes. So it's very weird visual phenomenon. So visual phenomena in ancient astronomy and astrology were one of the most important in terms of interpretation. And if you do an interpretation of any astrological charts, you will usually start with cookbooks like, Mars in Virgo means this, when it's in this house it means that, etc. Like, this Mercury in here shows me I'm good with travel, but the aspect says not good with travel, so people get confused, etc. Retrogradation is one of those elements that usually change most of the interpretations to something weirder or stranger.
Yeah, and is it necessarily negative when a planet goes retrograde? Because everybody gets quite negative about Mercury retrograde, but I always say to people, when it's retrograde, you just need to redo something, rethink, reorganize, just stick the word re in front. Does the same apply to all the other planets as well?
Well, the perfect keywords for retrograde planets come from Sal ibn Bishr. He's an Arabian astrologer from 9th century. And he just gave a short passage which just lists 4 words that perfectly show what the ancient and traditional astrologers usually seen planet that go retrograde. So the 4 words are disobedience, collapse, repetition, and disagreement.
Oh, right.
And other astrologers, for example, Valence from ancient astrology, 2nd century, says retrograde planets shows delays in expectations. So whatever you expect, because the planet was going forward, but then it turned its back and started to, going backwards. So your expectations are not met, or you will have to wait much more when the planet turns back to its normal forward direction. Also, all the actions get delayed. So if you expect something to happen, but the planet that is responsible for this goes retrograde, it can either not happen, or like with Mercury retrograde, you will hear like every weird thing about communication failing or stuff like that. Profits also are delayed. So if you start with something with retrograde planet, then
What, like start a business, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, for example, Saturn is a planet that is from the classical planets mostly influential over businesses. So if you start a business or work with Saturn retrograde, it might be very difficult to keep this job, or like to not get I don't know, insane or want to quit it, like things like that. Or if you have Saturn retrograde in your birth chart, then keeping one job, 9 to 5 job, would be a really struggle if this like Saturn is quite important in your chart.
Oh, cool.
Others would say like it's generally difficulty and misfortune to have retrograde planets. So this is classical view, but the thing is, this is just the classical version of cookbooks, which means that it's just the one of the downsides. So if you just have a planet retrograde, it doesn't mean it's like terrible for you.
Okay.
But if you have planet that is retrograde and in bad aspect, or and in bad house, or the sign of its fall, like some more components, then we usually read it as non-promising, troublesome, and disappointing. So something that will make you very nervous and anger at the world.
Got ya.
Yeah, but this is just the one part of this, because we are dealing here with materialistic views. So in terms of mundane words, doing action, achieving goals, retrogrades are like because it's just abnormal situation, going against the grain, etc. So you are supposed to expect that things will not happen as expected. So, for example, the other part is more spiritual, and in modern astrology, you will learn a lot of people try to stress out that these planets are more spiritual. It actually comes at least from since the 8th century, because Mashallah has shown that he also thinks of retrograde planets as showing more spirituality, because of planet that goes direct is a normal planet, and normal planets were seen as parts of the soul that descend from the sky, from heaven, and descend down to earth, and the earth, with this material world, so they lose their godliness and become just lower entities, so to say. So if the planet turns around, it's like if it will be going up again, like ascending. So the person loses, or a planet loses focus or goals that are materialistic or mundane day to day, and gets more focus on spirituality, things that are more like about its soul, etc. Not necessarily religion, but more of this kind of like disconnection with the mundane world. Like they
Sure.
just
Yeah, because I've got Mercury retrograde myself, so I do know what some planets like, and I'm always waffling on about it because it means that I don't learn in a regular way. And I've taught, like yourself, I've taught myself astrology, but you've got a diploma as well. I don't even have that, but I've taught myself astrology because I couldn't have been taught it by someone else. I had to learn it myself, which is why I teach it for people to learn themselves. I don't teach astrology, I help people learn for themselves because everybody's different. But I've only found that out from having the Mercury retrograde, and it wasn't until I understood astrology, it's like light bulb moment, that was why I was just shit at school, excuse my French, but yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I like the disobey one. That sounds nice.
Yeah. So if I just add another note for this spirituality thing, I actually think it ties very nicely to the word itself. So maybe I'll just tell you what the word actually means, because the English word retrograde, or so going retrograde, or the noun for this phenomenon retrogradation, come directly from Latin retrogradus, which means retrograde. Retro means like backwards or reversing, and gradus is just a step. So like when you walk, you make steps. So it literally means going backwards or going with your steps backwards, something like that. So the other translation that the scholars use is regression. So Mercury is in regression, something like that, or that is retracting its steps instead of moving forwards. So I think this would be better words for to use in English, because they mean something instead of like just retrograde and nobody knows what it actually means. But the Latin retrogradus or noun retrogradatio come from actually just strictly translating from the Greek. And the Greek original term from the ancient Greek or Hellenistic astrology is actually a bit deeper in meaning. The noun for a planet that is retrograde is anapodismos. So it's again consists of two parts. Ana is just the prefix that is here means backwards again, and podismos comes from pause, or version of this word in declination is podos, feet. So you might know about podology, the doctors who deal with your feet, etc. So it basically means something with your feet that goes back, reverse. So the meaning is the same. And but if you dig deeper, it has more than one meanings, because Latin retrogradus almost 90% of the time is just reserved for planets or stars.
Okay.
But the Greek term is just the usual term for like walking backwards. But the other meanings are, let me read that. Make a step backwards, to return. It's used for reoccurring events. And in astrology, retrograde planets often show that something will happen more than once.
Oh, okay.
It's maybe it's connected with the thing that, and when planet goes goes direct, then goes retrograde, passing through the same degrees it already has, then turns direct again and passing the same degrees for the third time.
Yes, so that's a thing that a lot of my students probably don't know already, that a planet just doesn't go retrograde and then go forward again. It might go backwards a bit to a certain degree and then go direct and then make a further retrograde. It's like, ooh, this is something that we probably haven't discussed anything on the podcast. So it's really exciting hearing from the expert that knows all about it, because I don't. That's a good point.
So this part of astronomy is very important, like, because we visually see what the planet is doing. It goes, for example, to 30 degree of, let's say, Aries, and then turns retrograde. So it goes 99th degree, 98th, etc., and will go several degrees, almost reaching the beginning of the sign. And after some weeks or months, or whichever planet is it, how long it takes, then it will go direct again and will pass again like 10th, 11th, 13th, and so it has to catch up. So every time a planet makes a circle around the zodiac, when it goes retrograde, it slows down. It has to make a loop in the sky to catch up, go back to some things it was already passing or transiting, and do them again when direct. So it's very like people want some things to go instant. We have a business plan, we do this and that, but now we have a loop, we have to go back. Some papers, like we're missing something, oh my god, someone said they can't give us the funds or things like that. So it's all like retrograde thinking.
Yeah, and a lot of people get that sensation sometimes when they start something. When I've done readings for clients before now, and they go, I've tried, I feel as if I've taken 10 steps forwards and 14 steps backwards. That's the sensation that you'd be getting with the retrograde planet. Like you're really progressing really well with your homework, or like you say, your job, and then all of a sudden you're not moving forwards. Because where do we get this sensation of moving forwards from? It's strange, isn't it? Because us as humans, we don't move forwards. There's no such thing as time. We've given it a thing, but yeah. Oh wow, okay.
Okay, so let's continue with the Greek word because it's even deeper in the meaning. Re-examination. So this is another keyword that we could use to retrograde, and it's it's either positive or negative. Because if planet goes retrograde, we, especially Mercury, we are supposed to like re-examine these details or documents or information or our devices, because something might need a revision or there's an error that we are supposed to change before we can go forward with the stuff. Another meaning, call back and question.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Greeks were very particular with the words, and if you study some words, of course, like you might overemphasize something, but if you see the richness and you can also see this in the actual interpretations, then it all makes sense why someone would see the planet making a loop in the sky and think that it is revising things, that it makes some delays, etc. Yeah.
Because it isn't in reality actually going backwards like a car going into reverse, is it? It's because of the speed between the two planets. Because I think somebody described it to me once, was that if you had a train at the station and another train came past, the train that's stationary at the station, or if they take off, one looks as if it's going backwards. I think it's about speed, that's it. So if one train's doing 30 miles an hour and the other's doing 40, as it goes past, it looks as if this one's going backwards. It's not, it's just traveling at a slower speed. It's not the planet isn't literally going backwards, is it? It's just the speed between the two. Is that correct?
Well, actually, so we try to make a very astronomy one-on-one on retrograde.
Okay.
Which, at best, your listeners, if they really want to understand it, just Google some astronomy models of retrograde planets, like 3-5 minutes, few videos of that, and you will see it. But let's try to say it with some simplification. So the planet go around the sun. All the planets go around the sun with actually the same speed. So this is not the matter of speed, but because they travel around the sun. Sorry, with inside the orbits, and each planet is further away. So each orbit is we have concentric orbits, and the further away the planet is from the Earth, we will see that it takes so much more time to travel through the zodiac from our perspective, because it's further away. So it's same like if a car passes before your face driving 30 miles per hour, it will be zoom. But if it's some train a kilometer away, it will keep traveling. And you will keep seeing it, like you might even think it's like not moving at all. So it's not the speed, but there are actually two kinds of different explanations, or no, maybe it's not the best wording, but we should divide planets in two sets. We have the Earth and we have the interior planets, so the Mercury and Venus, which are within the orbit of the Earth. Yes. So they always circle the sun, and if we look at the horoscopes of the sky, they are never more further away from the sun than Mercury. Actually, it's
either in your own side or on either side of it, isn't it? Yeah. So like if you were born a Scorpio, your Mercury can only ever be Libra on one side, or Sagittarius in the other. Okay. So it never moves more than, but Venus can be a bit different to that. But again,
Venus can go 1.5 sign away, from the sun. But it depends. You really have to either like have your astrological programs or ephemeris, because it's like between 50 degrees and 38 for Venus, and 15 to I think 24, if I remember correctly. So it's a bit different, because the orbit of the Earth is also moving around. So like this astronomy is a bit complicated.
Okay.
But with Mercury and Venus, it's special because we always see the sun and Mercury and Venus next to it, and we always see either they are going in front of the sun, the half of their orbit, or behind the sun. So when they go in front of the sun, they are retrograde. When they go behind the sun, they are moving forward.
Oh, okay.
Meaning, when you have when the Venus, for example, or Mercury pass through the sun, it's a conjunction, and you're not sure which one. So, but when you have the Venus ahead of the sun in the maximum point, which is, let's say, 38 degrees, and it's actually a station, so it will slow down. It seems so from Earth, and will start to go retrograde. And you can know that because it went stationary or make this station before changing direction, because when it was in front of the sun in zodiac. So it has to go backwards, because it can't go more forward, because it has reached the maximum of its orbit. And when you see it's the most far away from the sun, behind it, and the station happens, it has to go forward, because the sun is moving on, and the planet has to catch up, because there is no much more orbit to go further away. So these two planets are very special, and when they're very close to the sun, so retrogradation is actually half of the orbit. So one side of the sun they are retrograde, one side of the sun they are direct, but within, say, 50 degrees to the sun, they go combust, because they disappear inside the sun. So when you have planet that is at the same time retrograde, so in front of the sun, and invisible, very interesting things happen, especially if this planet is your ascendant ruler. But in any ways, Mercury and Venus are always important. And if there is any connection with the job or a vocation, so if it's an angular planet, so it's in the first, 10th, or even 7th or 4th house. So in other words, it's angular houses, especially in the 10th house, so relating to career. This person who has such Mercury or Venus, or especially if both, is my favorite description, symbolic for this, is like imagine that you are behind a cloud, and below this cloud there's a maze, a labyrinth, and people want to go from one side to the other side, and then go through the labyrinth and spend like ages there and like go stupid. But you are like just behind, and you can see like you could just jump from this cloud to the end. But if you so such people will usually have very insightful business skills. Whatever company they go, they bach, and they like know everything better than everyone, and everyone is like, oh my god, how did you do it, etc. But there's a catch. As soon as you tell them what you actually did, because this planet is retrograde and invisible, people would think, no, that's stupid, that's crazy, you're an idiot, and they will just come with torches and just make you even leave the job, because they would just make a hell for you, because what seems for them to be different, they think it's stupid, idiotic, like you're some retarded person, like no chance, you are either lying or it was just a luck if you did what you did and did this wonderful results. So even though the company becomes to strive, etc., they fire such a person, and then the 5 people has to come to make this person job, and even though they can't keep up with the gain they had with this person. So such people would have such experience. If it's not job, it can be related with family or whatever. But if your planet is retrograde and combust, so invisible, the best advice I always give for my clients is just do your thing, better. Don't listen to these people who just go through this maze, because it's stupid, but don't tell them what you did. Don't let them show at your hands. Just like be yeah, I'm just like the secret person. I have my secrets or whatever. It's very strange, difficult. I spent hours on that, even though like you just come up with, the resolution or the idea how to do it. Yeah.
So do they have unusual ways of doing things, people with retrograde planets? Because we're going to go on in a minute and you're going to tell us a bit about how to recognize a retrograde planet. But is somebody who's got one, would they do things more differently to someone else? Is that what makes it different in a chart?
Yeah, so we come to the keywords from Sal: disobedience, collapse, repetition, disagreement. So normal people will see this person that he has came here, he's disobedient, he makes this company collapse, his ideas are outrageous, he just do some weird things over and over again instead of our like way to do. He disagrees with us, he thinks he knows better, etc. So everyone sees retrograde planets as more or less weird, depending on the chart, because you can have the planet more normalized or more weird through the other elements of your chart.
Okay.
And if you have it retrograde and combust, there's at least two elements of weirdness, or something like people think it's weird and they can't see, so they can't like grasp what you actually did. So yeah, you must be some kind of like weird game for them.
Okay.
So this is Mercury and Venus. And with the rest of the planets, we can jump again to the cars or trains analogy. So for every other planet except Mercury and Venus, the Earth is the most inside orbit, and the rest of the planets have the orbits outside. So imagine like you are driving in a car and you have the tracks that are all concentric circles. You are the inside circle, Mars is next to you, and blah blah blah, the following planets. And you are driving at the same speed, but because of your orbit, your track is the shortest one, you will speed up and pass through all these planets. So imagine if you are driving this car, you have the same speed as, for example, the Mars that is next to you driving in his red car, and you are passing by him, and you look at your right window, and it seems to you that he is going backwards for a moment, right? Until you catch up and go another circle and meet him again.
So would this be like, if we did the analogy, this would be like on a racetrack? That would be the better way of thinking about it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but all the cars going the same speed.
Yeah.
And the tracks are far away because the planets are not so close, like in this easy pictures like for astronomy, etc. They just like, oh my god, so much away that everything is like a slow train on the horizon. So there is actually a very easy way to recognize when the planet is retrograde, except for Mercury and Venus, which we already covered. It's a bit difficult, but when you know where it's stationing, you will know what direction it changes. But with the other planets, because they are slower than the sun, it's the sun that approaches this planet, pass through them, and go further away. So it's very simple. If you imagine your sun is on the exactly bottom of an astrological chart or birth chart or whatever, and any planet that is in the bottom half, so half that has a sun in the middle of it, can't be retrograde, except for Venus and Mercury, because they are different. Anything that is in the top part, so everything opposite the sun, is always retrograde. So if you have a planet in opposition to the sun, you can be sure it's retrograde. There is no other chance it's not.
Really? So if you had Pluto opposition sun, then Pluto would be retrograde?
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. And then same thing, Mars opposition sun, then the Mars would be retrograde.
Yes. So
wow,
Mars...
how long have I been doing astrology and I didn't know that? Sorry.
Yeah, so that's why I was doing the research, because like nobody is showing these pictures, or if they mention it, it was not something that it makes sense. It was very too scientific and like just briefly mentioned. So, for example, Mars is the closest to us, so it
Yes.
is retrograde only when it's actually the sign opposite the sun and about. So, imagine the sun in the middle of the opposition of the Mars and 1.5 sign each side of the opposition, Mars will be retrograde. For
Right.
Jupiter, it's much more because whenever it's between trine opposition and another trine, so between the two trines, it's roughly retrograde. For Saturn, it's even a bit more. So from Pluto, which is the more furthest away from the sun, the arch for retrogradation is the greatest because it needs to be just 99 degrees away from the sun. So it's almost a square. It's a bit more than square. So if you have sun, it's at some point, and you imagine a half of this astrological chart with the sun in the middle, the Pluto anywhere in the other half, except for a few degrees on the edges, would be always retrograde. So if you look at any chart, find where the sun is, look what planets are in the half opposite to this planet, and you can bet that most of them are retrograde. So that's how you easily eye on, if this chart has many retrogrades or not.
Luckily, astro.com makes it easy for us with having the little R next to each planet. But that's a good way to eyeball a chart, isn't it? If you're looking at things that are opposite. So is it always things that are opposite the sun, or could you get something like excuse me for asking this, but I honestly don't know the answer. But say you had Mars opposition Jupiter, would there be a retrograde thing going on, or is it just everything that's opposite the sun?
This is the solar cycle. So
okay.
It's actually very similar to the moon because the moon makes the phases when it goes around the sun. So it's the moon's relation to the sun shows you if it's full, if it's new moon, if it's quarter, etc. And for retrograde planets, when they are close to the moon, they conjoin the moon, the sun, they get invisible. But when they are opposite, they get retrograde. So when I mentioned it's the same with like the moon, because the moon, when it's opposite the sun, it's the brightest because the full moon. Same with the planets, when they are opposite the sun or retrograde, so more than opposite the sun, just around the half of the chart opposite to the sun. They are the brightest, and the opposition point is obviously the most bright because they are the closest to the Earth. Because remember that our car, being the Earth, passes next to the car of Mars, Saturn, etc. So we see the car as very shiny, but at the same time it goes reverse. So some people in India interpreted retrograde planets as benefic or positive because they are bright.
Okay.
But we all remember the dreadful keywords I was mentioning for the retrogrades because of the loop. Like the loop might be like more troublesome. So the light is again a thing that makes this planet more spiritual, more like deep inside, and have their own understanding instead of like trying to blend in with the public.
Right. Okay. So would these be outlier type of people that might have, say somebody had a lot of retrograde planets, and we are going to go on to somebody that does have that. They're not going to be normal inverted commas. So you're not going to be sort of following the same as everybody else.
So there was one guy that made a statistic on a number of planets retrograde. His name was McCormick, and he did it in either 70s or 80s, I think 70s. And has done it for the it was a part of 19th century and part of 20th century or something like that, which I stumbled upon when I was trying to find, has anyone ever written about many retrogrades? Because I have been very close with a person who has 7 planets retrogrades.
Whoa!
And no one was writing about this. I knew that studying astrology, I can do interpretation of charts for anyone. For this person, none of this works. Like it's like always like the opposite, or I say whatever, and this person will say, "Well, that's bullshit." Like, and so what? Like this, there was no value in whatever tidbit of interpretation I could give him. So I have like, okay, I have found one person, but this is not satisfactory. He only found a few people with 6 retrogrades, and one of them was actually 5 retrogrades. So he only found one, and said that if anyone with 7 retrogrades is being born, and they are sure born, but very, very rarely, they must be like completely strangers, aliens, etc., like totally different people. So I was like fired up to make the research, to make my own statistics for the entire 21 centuries of our era, and have also interview some people with 6 retrogrades and 7 retrogrades. So basically what is seen in the screen is the result of the statistics, which says that to have no planet retrogrades, it's about 7-8% chance. So you are very rare if you don't have planets retrograde. So to have any planet retrograde, it's 92-93%. So almost all of the charts have at least one planet retrograde, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm counting here our 8 modern planets. So 5 classical planets: Mercury to Saturn, plus Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So if you have one planet retrograde, it's 19% of the time. So I mean 90. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I need to be precise with this. When you have 2, it's 29%. When you have 3, it's 26%. So if you have either 3 or 2, you are 56% of population. So most of the people have 2 or 3 planets, because
that's
2
the general.
2, yeah. So 2 and 3 are next to each other arithmetically. So we can treat it as a group. So for me, if someone has 2 or 3 planets retrograde, they are the normal, the so-called norm. So whatever these people live, think, etc., they set the standards. And if someone has no planet retrogrades, these 2 and 3 retrograde people would think he's stupid or strange or weird, or I don't like him, or whatever. Or if someone has more, then similarly. But so more than 3. If you have 4 planet retrogrades, it's 12, or actually 30% of time, 1-3, which is still kind of big, kind of small. So 4 retrogrades differ. Either they could be weird or quite normal, depending which planets are retrograde and other factors in the charts. But starting from 5 planets retrograde, it's only 4% chance you have planets retrograde, or 4% of people being born are in longer periods of time have this many planets retrograde. And to have 6-7 planets retrograde, it's 0.00 points%. So I have counted, for example, also the astrologers. So I have a sampling of a couple short from 1,000 astrologers from Astro Data Bank, and 0 of them had 7. The rest of the numbers kind of are similar to the normal distribution, what you would expect statistically to have this or that number of planets, but a bit more people among the astrologers have 1 planet retrograde. A bit more have 0 retrogrades. And we have a bit less people with standard 3 retrogrades. So astrologers are a little bit retrograde weirder, so to say, but not so much. So this is the statistic, and we can switch to this table of the centuries to show you more to describe it more exactly. So each line is a century, and the columns are the decades. It's about 7 retrogrades going at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So this is the table just for seeing how actually rare are those. So each century has 36,500 something days. So in the first century, there's 0 retrogrades. So there are some centuries where there are no planets retrograde. We can have even up to 244 years without 7 retrogrades. And the most that are retrograde as for per centuries are, it's usually between like 3, 1, and 9 days per entire century. So it's like very small, like 0.00 etc%. The most was, let me see, 64 days in 3 periods in the 4th century.
Yes,
So
I can see that. Yeah. Okay.
So
There's a
for
lot
example, yeah.
bunched.
So they are really weird people, like very unexceptional in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, now we have 20th century. So the last time, let me see exactly the dates. In 1944, in January, we had 4 days of retrograde planets. And then again in 1984, between the end of April and beginning of May, we had also 5 days of 7 retrogrades, and again 2.5 days in the summer of 1986. And that's it in the entire century. So the people that can be alive today and have 7 retrogrades had to be born within these 13 days, right?
Wow. Okay.
So they are very rare.
So if my mother was born in, like, for instance, she was born in 1921, she'd be like 1900 line, the 20th century, and there was only 12 days in that century that any planet went retrograde. Am I reading that right? Yes.
When sorry, the maximum 7, because this table shows that only 7 can be retrograde at the same time. We never seen 8 retrograde at the same time in the entire 20 or 21 centuries, and we will not see them for at least 25 centuries. Technically, it's possible, like astronomy wise, to have 8 retrogrades, but it didn't happen yet, as much as our Western culture is alive.
Oh, right. Okay. Wow. Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So the next time 7 planets will go retrograde is in the next century. So like actually 21st century. So I think we already are there yet. It's in 2080s and just 3 days. So some of us might be alive, not many though. But there's also an interesting situation when you look at only classical planets. So we have 5 classical planets that go retrograde, and it's much more rarer. But indeed, you can have all 5 planets go retrograde. So I think this shows a bit more how it's more idealistic system, because like you can have these retrogrades, all of them retrograde. And for example, the last time the 5 planets were retrograde was in 16th century.
Okay.
So it was so far ago. So we will show one chart, but the next time it will happen, it will be 2076. But the very next one would be in the same century, 2082, when 5 planet classical will go retrograde, but at the same time 7 planets of all our modern planets will go retrograde. So I think this will be a special point first in entire era. So something interesting should happen at this point, or end, or switch, or I don't know, maybe one of those end of the world or whatever.
Yeah. Let's hope not.
Yeah, so let's go to the Nostradamus chart.
Okay, right. This is our man, Nostradamus.
Very easy chart to read, because we have Sun exactly on the MC. So our Sun is on top of the chart. So it's very easy to imagine, the half of the chart, top half with the Sun, would be mostly direct planets, except Mercury and Venus. And in this chart, Mercury and Venus are both retrogrades.
Yes, I can see that.
And on the opposite side of the Sun, any planet there would be retrograde. And here we have the rest of the classical planets: Mars retrograde, Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, all very close to the not more far away than 8 degrees from the IC, and Sun is on the MC. So they are all opposite the Sun. So very bright, very very important point in the solar cycle. And also Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, they rule every other planet in the chart and the ascendant. So they are like the retrogrades are like ruling this chart.
Okay, and
For
that's
example,
because his ascendant is in the sign of Aries, and the planet that rules that is Mars. Am I reading that right? Okay.
yes.
I just want to, sorry, interrupt you for a second. Nostradamus was a famous French astrologer who wrote a whole load of books. And one of the books, there's lots of books that he wrote, but the thing is, he wrote a lot that then was interpreted as things like predicting the Second World War and Hitler and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, he wrote it in rather flowery language. However, an awful lot of things that he predicted, and quite a lot of things were wars and sort of scary stuff like that. But the things that he's predicted have come true. Now, it depends what you classify as a prediction and what you classify as coming true. But he's most famous for being an astrologer that was pretty good at prediction. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, I would say he was for a long time very popular, and actually the only name of astrologer people who know nothing about astronomy or like Ptolemy or figures like that would know. They just know, oh, Nostradamus, like, yeah, the astrology, etc.
So
So he
he's
was
born
like a
in
symbol
1503.
for many. What?
1503, he's born, long time ago. Yeah, is that right?
Yes.
21st of December 1503. So this isn't somebody that was born yesterday. This is an old chap, but it's a wonderful fact that we're looking at his chart there. And that's
but
the moon in sign. So he's got sun in Capricorn on the MC, and then his moon is in the sign of
Aquarius. But for retrogrades, we don't really care about the moon. So
no.
Venus is in Aquarius, Mercury is in Sagittarius. Ninth house, so where astrologers were put in traditional astrology. Mercury was also the planet of astrologers. So we have very, very weird or very spiritual symbolic astrologer here, right?
Yeah.
And Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are near the IC in Cancer. So Mars is in fall. Yes, Jupiter is in exaltation, and Saturn is opposite his home. So all of these planets are either very excited or very distressed, and also opposite the Sun and retrograde. So Saturn is so difficult, long things. Long periods of time, and Mars is wars, Jupiter is big things, flashy, etc. So all of them together, and you have the Nostradamus like predicting wars and things like that for the entirety of almost like future, and very cryptic, retrograde. Everyone's tried to decipher it or say, oh, he did predict World Trade Center fall or this or that, but it's never said straight in his writings. It's always more like poems
Yes,
about
poetry,
science, etc. So yeah, but he also, except for that, because he has many retrogrades, this is probably why he was researching the retrogrades, and he was the author of updates for planetary tables, because retrograde periods were outdated at his time.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Ooh. I like his part of fortunes quite in the sign of Taurus. I don't know if that's helpful there, but it's probably helped his finances a bit. He didn't appear to die starving in a garret somewhere. He was quite successful. I mean, Sun on the MC, one's going to be really focused on one's career, isn't one? He was obviously a career astrologer. He wasn't just doing it quietly. He was making some money from it, making a name for himself.
Sun on the NC would be just a famous and important figure. So he was one. Or have dealt with important figures like kings, etc. Why don't we just jump to Michael's chart, just to show you the example of someone born with 7 planets retrograde, so being this 0.005% of population. So he was born on the 30th of April 1984. So within this couple of days, that 7 planets were retrograde. And since I was talking about this chart so many times, I'm not quite sure what to focus about, but probably what I usually did is he has Sun and Moon in Taurus. In 11th house. The moon is approaching the sun, so it's invisible. So it's one of those combust planets. So even the moon makes him better not share how he does things at jobs or whatever, because people would just try to destroy him mentally or financially or otherwise.
So he's got Cancer ascendant. He's got Sun and Moon in Taurus in
Yeah.
the 11th. Okay.
Yeah. In the 10th house Aries, he has Venus, which is the only direct planet, and Mercury, which is retrograde, and it's the same degree as Venus. So it makes Venus even a bit more retrograde because it's conjunct retrograde planet. And they are also very close to the Sun, even though they are the next sign. They are also both combust. So he's the example of the person who, and this is 10th house, like I was saying. 11th house is another house that is a bit correlated with what you do, because it's the gains or things that come from the 10th house, because it's second house from the 10th. So for sure, with those three signatures relating to the Sun being combust, related to the job, he had very, very different situation and jobs. He was always a revolutionarist. Wherever he went, the business would always thrive, but he would always be like forced to resign because he couldn't cope with toxicity or like hate or things like that, or everything he knew is obvious for everyone is no, we do it differently. No, like, so it's even if no one was like after him literally, he like couldn't cope with people just doing this labyrinth maze, like, oh, we have to turn right, left, blah blah blah, and he was, no, just go outside the maze and take this, I already did it. No, I have to go through the maze and see myself.
Wow.
So very, very frustrating. But opposite the Sun in Taurus, in Scorpio, he has three planets retrogrades: Mars, Saturn, and Pluto. So all three bad planets. And in Scorpio, which is a bit bad sign, right? So
no. Come on now, let's not discriminate against Scorpio as a sign. But yeah, I was joking.
No, I'm just making simplification because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So the Saturn from among these three retrogrades in Scorpio is actually directly opposite the Sun. So we have Sun opposite the retrograde planets, and Saturn among the retrograde planets is the most difficult one for the materialistic, mundane things, because it will make your life a hell, literally. Like, everything is so long, the loop is so long, the retrograde loop, like everything for example, he would say some things to people, they will call him idiot, etc. 10 years later, come to him, tell him the same things, and again call him stupid, and he was like, Matt, I already told you this 10 years ago, and you call me idiot, etc., or whatever, and you made my life a hell. And they're like, oh, like, stop with your, and they are attacking again. So things like that. So Saturn can be like grandfathers or people, or Sun Saturn can be fatherly relation, and Saturn is kind of related with doing a job as well, so job troubles again. So like, he has quite a struggle to not think he's like he's insane, because he knew things since he was a child. Since his childhood, he knew certain things will happen, and of course with retrogrades, decades had to pass, or at least some years, but everything happened the way he imagined. He only like didn't know when it will happen or things like that.
Okay.
So he knew if someone will break up with someone, etc., or this company will just do this or that, etc. But he never, can just like take actions, because so many retrogrades make him, go into such loops and maze that even though he knows how to go behind the labyrinth, he's like in the sea, and the waves get him left, right, etc. He still sees the thing, but
So it's like he's working against the energy of the universe in a way.
Yes, exactly.
No,
So
not universe, the humanity, because humanity
mhm.
wants to do it this way, and he sees that it's possible to do it another way. So he's working against humanity, but maybe he's working maybe with a higher plane or something. Is that the thing? Because if you were thinking on a
Yes,
spiritual level, all that challenge, yeah.
yes, I would say so. And when I compared other people that had 7 retrogrades, so were born on the same day or day before or after, I have like 3 or 4 charts of those people. The situation is the same. Like they go to a business, the business is making like almost millions, and their life is a hell. They have to go away. They have almost no friends because everyone is like a leech, or either wants to punish them or wants something from them to help them solve the problems, to then blame him for not solving them the perfect way, etc. Like
He'd be
yeah,
better off
so
being
so go,
self-employed, wouldn't he? Working for himself. You know, when you've got that type of a
yeah,
chart, you need to work for yourself rather than work for someone else,
exactly.
possibly.
But
Yeah.
also Saturn retrograde, it's quite difficult to have the discipline,
Mm.
because maybe let's say one important thing, that retrograde planets, you could use also a keyword that you get disappointed with. And then, so
Disappointed.
for example, Saturn is a planet of structures.
Mm-hmm.
So you get disappointed with any structures. Either it's you're trying to make a structure in your life, materialistic, or any jobs, or like clerks, people working in government, etc.
Mm.
Or, for example, broken promises is one key example for Saturn retrograde, if it's important, for example,
Mm-hmm.
opposite the Sun or something like that.
Mm.
So going back to the spirituality, that's why I kind of call 7 retrogrades people, also 6 retrogrades a bit as well, kind of like an equivalent of the old souls in the Age of the Soul theory, or in the numerology, how are called the numbers? 11, master numbers, 11, 22, etc. And Michael, for example, has master number 11 also. So how they are, I'm not saying it's like validating that, or similarity, or even numerology, etc. But the way they are described and what I see in 7 retrogrades kind of seem like they're trying to describe the same unusualness of the people. And now I'm coming back to the spirituality. So because every planet, almost every planet is retrograde, so going against the grain, making loops, seeing things differently, going, like I said, ascending towards like being more spiritual and just observing instead of being caught up in mundane, like the majority people, like with 2 and 3 retrograde planets. So everywhere they happen to be, they call friction, because like almost like the laws of physics would go crazy. For example, Mike for many years had trouble because electronics would just broke just by him touching. Someone has an old phone that is, I don't know, 10 years old. He asks something, Mike takes the phone, and the phone dies. Things like that. Yeah. So he had very many things he had to replace. So, and same with people, like they attract broken people. Like there are many people with 6 retrogrades that are circled by approached by many drug addicts that are just, beyond saving, and they just glue to these souls because they probably, because they are, their brains are turned off because of troubles or addictions, or playing the victim or something like that. They kind of can sense, oh, this person is different, maybe I should try leech on them and have some gain from that. So let me also, as we are here, give you the quote I just constructed from all the interviews with people with 7 retrogrades and 6 retrogrades, because most of them during the interviews said similar things. So the ideal quote for this would be so person with many retrogrades speaking, I feel like I'm from some other planet or another reality. I see this world like I'm in front row of a circus where people do strange things over and over, like a hamster in a wheel, and they are not able to see beyond what they do. I can't help anyone because they can't understand what I mean, and usually they will express being mad at me for saying anything. Or they will ignore me totally, or just treat me as I need psychological treatment. So I keep most of the stuff I see for myself. So you will see that people who have this many retrogrades would be very private about what they really think and what they really see.
Yeah.
They will kind of be forced to put some persona to even have friends, or be able to do a lot of things in life. Yeah.
So they're not going to be out in the mainstream then. Well, hopefully they're not running countries. So I hope we haven't got too many prime ministers that have got that amount of retrograde planets, because they're going to do things differently. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It is true that I'm a believer that your retrograde planet will attract to you issues to do with that planet until you resolve them. And it is possible to resolve how a retrograde planet is, using I don't know, magic or methods or sort of remedies in some way. It is possible to make it better. It doesn't have to be a cause of suffering forever, but then that depends how open you are to being able to resolve that this time round, because somebody might need to reincarnate again. I was talking last week about karmic astrology. Maybe Michael, in his case, has chosen this lifetime that is so challenging for him for a specific reason, because his previous one was nice and easy. It's like, oh, I'm going to have a challenge this time. We don't know. But I think sometimes you will attract to you your retrograde planet, wherever it is, issues to do with it until you go, aha, that's not me, that's my planet, and that's not who I am. Because you can't have the sun can never retrograde, the moon can never retrograde. So we're always going to be projecting onto others the issues to do with our retrograde planets. But once we take it back to ourselves and say, it's not them, it's me, it's my retrograde bloody planet, I'm going to just own it in some respects. Maybe that's, I don't know, it's a rhetorical question, but maybe that's a solution or a way forwards for someone.
So in terms of remedies, of course, it's a matter of opinion, if you believe in them or not. So I'm not giving this answer, but I would say that if they work for people with many retrogrades, these are the normal remedies. So they probably won't work for those folks. And what works for them is just do their own thing.
Yeah.
Not share what they so most of them, because of these struggles, would really want someone to understand them, to say they are not stupid, etc. And the best thing they can do before they achieve it themselves, which actually anyone could do, everyone should do, but that's another thing. In the meantime, just if they can take it for sort of granted that it won't happen, so I am not expecting it, I am learning to not have to need to be accepted by society the way I am. So I have my ways. I just do my things. Don't ask for opinions, etc., because it's almost like asking for trouble or to be hurt emotionally. So if they are able to embrace and not want attention, which attention is always something that they'll be quirk, that is part of the box for them.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we are already past the 1 hour mark, but I know you said
I'm happy.
I will cover some stuff like perfection, etc. So let's not waste this. So what we do with retrogrades, because we have covered something about natal charts, but we all know that planets are going direct or retrograde all the time. I've shown you the tables how often they go retrogrades or not. Well, no, actually I haven't. So let's just say quickly that Mercury goes retrograde 90% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
So 3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year. Venus goes retrograde 7% of the time, but it's every 19 months. So not every year, but within 2 years, you have one Venus retrograde. Mars the same. It goes retrogrades around 2 years. I mean, between each retrogradation is about 2 years. Actually, it's 25 months, so it's 9% of the time. So 9% chance of having Mars retrograde, right?
Okay.
Jupiter is 30%, Saturn 35%, and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all three have 40% of chance being retrograde. And
yeah, because I was looking at the cycle of Venus retrograde, because it's Venus is retrograde in Gemini at the moment, and when I was just checking this week, because I'm writing my column for the my newsletter, that Venus is retrograde at the moment in the sign of Gemini, and I checked and found, I was so happy, I found a retrograde Venus ephemeris, and said that the last time it went retrograde was 8 years ago, and it's an 8-year cycle that Venus will retrograde in the same sign. Yeah, so I thought, well, that's interesting. That again, because it's only we've been having this discussion about retrograde planets, I wouldn't even investigated it. But because this month now, June, we've got 6 of the planets, and that's what I was getting all excited about. Well, we're going to have 6 retrograde planets this month. This is why this podcast is happening, because we need to, as human beings, be able to understand how to cope with it. And I love these words, disobedience and disappointment, and disagreement. Is almost as if you stick dis in front of it. Was retrograde, I was talking about retrograde merging, just redo, rethink. But with this, we have to add dis in. And, there is an English word that is called dis. Don't diss me. It's like don't disrespect me, because, that's another thing. But I love the words with it. So it's totally changed how I'm thinking about retrograde planets now. It's a very, very interesting conversation we're having. That's keeping my moon in Gemini very happy. So I'll be guided by you. Go on.
Okay, so to comment on this thing. So first, Venus retrogrades, as I said, it goes retrograde every 19 months, but in different sign each time. But every 8 years, the retrogradation is in the same sign, roughly in the same degree, and roughly with the same relation to the sun. So, and at the same time, Venus going retrograde actually draws a 5-pointed star on the zodiac. So, like the point, it goes retrograde in Gemini, then here and here and here, and if you point it and if you draw the lines, it's a 5-pointed star, and
that's
it
just
keeps
crazy.
Going back to the same degree. It just shifts a little bit. So after a few years, it's not like 3 degree of the sign, but I don't know, a little bit this or that way.
Yeah, because I saw that on Erin Sullivan's page once. She'd done this lovely, I don't know where she got it from, but it was this pretty sort of picture that she got. It's in one of her books, because she's written a book about retrograde planets, and this picture, and I was fascinated. I think, really, is that how the orbits go? Through the signs, and it just makes this beautiful, beautiful shapes. I was thinking.
Yeah, so because it's a phenomenal visual astrology, retrogrades have so much deep gems. If you just dig, or so you could make like 20 episodes of different parts of what's interesting about retrogrades, right? And another thing to comment on, so we have retrogrades. In May, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 retrogrades at the same time. In June, we have 5. Then we will have also keep having at least 3 or 4 until October, and mid-September to 14th of November. So half of September, October, and half of November, Mars is retrograde. So this will be the most probably difficult moment.
Which month? July, or which month did you say? September.
Yeah, the red box. So the Mars, when Mars goes retrograde, because Mars is quite fast planet. So when it's in Aries, it goes almost to the end of Aries, but then decides to go retrograde. So before he goes direct again and leaves the Aries, it stays for so long, several months in Aries. So, and Mars in Aries is very strong Mars. So we can expect, I don't know if something with virus or wars or politics or whatever.
Well, we've got lots of rioting going on at the moment. So maybe it's not rioting, protesting, wrong word. Yeah.
This should be some heating moment when people or organization or countries put a lot of energy more than they were supposed to, or like something just consumes the world. And what else I wanted to say? Oh yes, so natal charts we were talking about. This is the transits or mundane astrology. But what for your own predictions? So a few words what you can do with retrograde planets, because as I said, it's a piece of cookbook astrology that is always important if the planet is retrograde or not. So elections, horary, transits, and predicting your future, you always have at least usually one planet retrograde. So you should pay attention what one is retrograde. But in terms of predictions, what I prefer to do, and I think it's really easy for people to follow, even though it's ancient astrology, very complicated, etc. But if you take the gist of it, it's quite simple. So that's why I asked you to make sure people are on the same page what the perfections are.
Yeah.
When you are your ascendant perfects, you are, I don't know, 5 years old, so it perfects to your 6th house, right? Etc. Or then 12 years later, it's also in the 6th house. And say this house is Aries. So when you have your birthday, you look at your solar return and you look, where is my Mars? And oh, it's retrograde. Okay, this year might be a bit weirder, or something might surprise me a bit more, comparing to the previous years of perfected Aries when Mars was direct, etc. Right? But but also throughout the year, you are looking at your perfected ascendant ruler. So for Aries perfections, you will be most interested in Mars. Like if you have, I don't know, looking all the transits, it's exhausting. There are so many planets, so many combinations, like 10 or something times 10 planets natal. It's so much. If you want to just take something small, just focus on your perfected ascendant ruler. So Mars, for example, if you are in perfected Aries, and especially look if this year this planet goes retrograde and when. Because at this point there will be a change, important change. And we already covered the keywords, so you can expect like this, and connect with your houses, planets, etc. Or expect some slowness, disappointment, making some loop. And a funny thing to use is to see the dates when it goes retrograde and when it goes direct. See what degrees are those, and then see when it passes through the same degree within this year. So when it's catching up, it covers the same degree. Before it go retrograde, it will pass a certain degree. It will go retrograde at a certain point. And you can kind of do like a visionary board and draw arrows between those dates when it's in the same degrees, and there should be some similarities or returning to some point or issue, etc. So it might help you with whatever happened these years to kind of brainstorm what comes from where and when it might resurface again, etc.
And it's always the chart, because I was saying on the podcast on the weekend just gone that I've got a Leo ascendant, so the sun is the ruler to Leo ascendant, but the sun can never go retrograde. But I just need to see where the sun is. So maybe I'm a lucky bunny, because but that's only when it comes to me being 60 now. So that's the ruler to it. But next year I'll be 61, obviously. Then there'll be a different ruler to my ascendant. My ascendant will still be the same, surely. But it'll be in the next house. Is that right? Okay, so the next house is Virgo and the ruler to that is Mercury. So next year,
So
then I need to be
Mercury
paying.
will go retrograde 3
It
times
will,
at
three
least a
times.
year.
Yeah.
So it'll be more short weird things than, for example, with Saturn retrograde when it's your perfected ruler.
Yeah.
So it's in other words called the Lord of the Year for your solar year. It stays almost in the same degree and it just goes retrograde. So retrogradation is almost the main point of Capricorn and Aquarius perfections for Saturn.
Yeah, because
Well,
they're
for
rulers
example,
to it.
yeah.
Yeah, because that was sorry to interrupt. The thing I wanted to ask when I was doing the podcast was that, are you saying that the year begins on the solar return, or does the year begin on the 1st of January? Because when I was looking at Chris's chart thing, it was like, well, and I'd mentioned on the podcast that if I'd died before my birthday, I legally would have died age 59, but I've got past my birthday, my solar return now, so I'm legally actually 60 because I can't pass my birthday. But I remember when my father died, what the date that they put on his tombstone, he hadn't made it to 60. He was legally 59 because they just put the year of death. They don't put the age. Do you know what I mean? And so that was my question. When you're doing the perfection and you're looking at the ruler and the Lord and whatever, are you saying it has to be after the birthday? Because what happens if you're born in December? Are you doing it from the December this year until the following year? Is it true that it's the solar return or the beginning of the year?
Yes, so it's definitely solar return because in astrology, generally, we don't care about the Gregorian calendar. And the beginning of the calendar has changed many times. So we only, of course, we have, for example, like birthday of the universe, which is either spring equinox or winter solstice, depending, or any other of the four tropics. But for all the people, your birthday is the start of the year of your life. So every perfection actually consists of 12 sub-periods. So like the ascendant travels one sign per year of your life. Within each year, it also starts from the same sign and travels one sign per month.
Okay.
And so it always has to be roughly the same amount of time. So roughly a year. Each perfection is a year.
Okay, and so this month we're in now, and we're going to be having 5 or 6 planets, whatever it is, that are going to be retrograde. I think it's 6, but we're going to have quite a lot of planets retrograde. So there's going to be a lot of people that are listening. Some of those planets will be rulers to some segment of their chart, and that's where you're saying that's where they need to look, especially if it's a slow-moving planet like Saturn or Uranus. I mean, Pluto can go retrograde for bloody ages. It can go retrograde for quite a few months. So that's then that planet that is now retrograding in the house, that's where you'd have to worry. So if it was in the 6th house, it's like, oh, I better look after my health. If it's 7, I better not punch my boyfriend. If it's the 10th, I better look after my career. Is that how it would work? That's because that's where it's going to be stationing and retrograding. Is that right? The planet we're looking at now. Yeah.
Not sure if I understand, but let's try to answer what I think are few questions you are asking. So, or maybe clarifying something that I think might not be very clear from what I had said. So, everyone checking what is their perfected ascendant.
Yeah.
And this sign is activated. So it's your sign of the year, right? So you are interested whatever happens with this sign as well as the ruler. So I was saying about tracking your ruler when it changes signs, when it goes retrograde, etc. This will be very important this year for you, more than any other transits. But also to check whatever is transiting through this sign or aspecting this sign. Obviously, you have to make some choices, like every Mercury or Moon aspect is not that important, but if Saturn makes an aspect, or especially if planets travel through a perfected ascendant, that's important. And if they happen to be retrograde, yeah, even more so.
Okay.
And another thing, I will also look at the angular signs from the perfected ascendant. So the opposite sign and squaring signs.
Yeah.
But the same thing with your natal chart. So you have your natal ascendant, which is the same for your entire life, and also 4 angular signs. And whatever happens in those 4 signs also is important. So if retrograde stuff happens there, especially on your solar return, because whatever happens on your solar return stays true for entire year. So it's the most important transit.
And does Astro.com have that whole perfected thing in there? Can you use that in it? I haven't found it on there. I don't know. It might be. Maybe I haven't checked all the charts because it's got a lot of info on there. Have you? I mean, you might not know the answer to the question, but I'll have to check through it. Can you do sort of, what does an astrologer do that does perfections? Do they make a perfected chart, or they just work out in their head using the table that I used?
No, it's the easiest to do it in your table, because you just, for example, count the years. Like I literally sometimes when I have someone's chart in front of me and don't care about, don't remember if that the 10th house is always 31st, third birthday, etc. So I just like count, or I don't know how many years old the person is, but I know their birthday, so I count, oh, they're born in 94, so 94, 95, 96, etc. And I just count the years until I reach, the current year, and I'm sure, like it's double checking for me, because sometimes this ordinal numbers and cardinal numbers can be confusing. Like 0 years, its first sign, it might be confusing for people, and I'm not perfect with math, so
neither am I.
so usually we just count what sign is perfected, which is just counting in 12s,
right?
Actually,
yeah.
right. Another thing I might mention is we can also look at progressions, and if you have retrograde planets at some points in a time, they go direct. And progressions are, whatever happens 3 days after your birth is whatever would happen in your life when you are 3 years old. So if, for example, your Mercury is retrograde and goes direct 3 days, 3 days later, when you are 3, something weird might happen.
Yes.
With you and things like that. So these dates can also help you.
Yeah, because I've covered progressions, and as I say, because I've got Mercury retrograde, and it stopped being retrograde whatever year on, because I was born when the sun was 15 degrees Pisces, and my Mercury's a bit further on from that, but there is a point where that planet in a progression starts to go forwards, and I haven't checked it for ages. I'll have to have a look and see what happened to me that age. Did something happen to me when I think it was in my teens, actually. I think it's when I moved to Switzerland, but that was however many days is the year that I am now. Yeah, I cover that when I'm teaching astrology. The progressions are interesting, but however, having said that, in astrology, it's a bit like going down the rabbit hole, because you can go down into these deep things. You can find this out, and there's like, I'm supposed to be doing a reading for a client. It's like, I found all this stuff. And I do that when I'm writing charts for people, because I was like, that's really interesting. Like this, 50 pages later, and for sure they're not going to read it all because they're going to die of boredom or something. But you, as the astrologer, it's so exciting to be able to find these things out. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, there's quite a lot that we could do. But perfections, I think, I hope I did the correct information when I did the podcast, but I've got the hang of it now. It makes sense, and it is an ancient technique, but it's quite a nifty one, because you'll be able to look to see what is the planet that you need to pay attention to this year. That's the ruler to the sign. But are you only using the ancient rulers? You're not using the modern ones?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay.
But the mother planet can happen to appear in a perfected sign, so this will make it more maybe not important, because I don't think of them as super important, but relevant, so to say, right? So if they're not angular to the natal chart or angular to the perfected signs, I ignore them. Otherwise, I take a look if they say something interesting or if they add something.
Okay, lovely. And Gregory, thanks. Do you feel that you covered enough for us to be able to understand it? Because we've been through a wonderful amount of different information here today. You're a professional astrologer. You're also a graphic designer. You work and live in Poland. You speak beautiful English, and your understanding of retrograde planets was like, when I was first reading the articles, go, wow, this is so interesting. Because it is. These are things I didn't even know about. The length of time that it's retrograde for you, because you just sort of look at astro.com and you see and you think that's it. But this whole discussion that we've had today is just amazing. It's like opening Pandora's box. Woo! I'm going to have quite fun with clients now. I can see that. Do you think there's anything else in particular that we need to know today? Do you think you've covered all the important parts of it?
Well, I think it's quite enough for people. There are probably some things I would love to add, but you can do this forever. The only thing might be a few words about horary, if we want to spend a few minutes more.
Yeah, definitely, because I've just started doing Ori. I've done 5 episodes on it now. I mean, I'm cheating. I'm learning it as I go. I think I started in episode 172. We've done 172, 173, 174, 176 all Ori, because I just thought that was fascinating that you can ask a specific question like, "Where's my handbag?" And I did this stupid example. I couldn't find my pen, and then I just literally was reading it in the book. It's like, "Oh my God, the pen was here all the time. It wasn't even not in the office, it was in a shelf underneath where I'm sitting. It had fallen into a box in there." But I thought that was so amazing because I was just reading the book by Lewis. I think his name's Lewis, and it was just amazing. But yeah, tell us about with Orrery astrology. I'm all ears.
Okay, so yeah, it's just short because retrogrades are quite straightforward in horary, because in horary we simplify things because we only focus on one question, one detail, so every reading is simplified. There is no like deeper spiritual like analogies or symbolism. No, we just want to get straight to the point, right? So retrogrades are generally we would use those negative keywords from the ancient and classical authors. Like especially most of them say that retrograde planet is not effective. So whatever is being described as retrograde planet, it won't bring the result.
Right.
Also, every other keywords like re-examination. So the retrogrades in horary or electional astrology also. So when you start something, are good for things that are that need to something. Redo? If you want to redo something, yeah, that's a great significator. It just shows me about redoing. It's not bad that my significator of revisiting my childhood home is retrograde. It just says so. It just confirms my question, etc. Or if you're looking for a lost object, if it's retrograde, it might help you because it shows that, oh, it's coming back, right? It's
Got you.
good if
Okay.
something comes back, yeah?
Yeah.
But if you want to get rid of something and it's retrograde, you won't have that easy time getting rid of it. What else?
Okay.
Cleaning, revisions, etc. I'll go with retrogrades. Otherwise, it's all these nasty keywords like ineffective, middling, confusing, rescheduling, people not showing up, people being upset, overoccupied with their personal stuff. For example, I had a series of horror questions about rescuing a cockatoo parrot from a zoo-like place, and there was a lot of question about their health, etc. And always the significator of the owner was Jupiter retrograde, and we had so much trouble finalizing everything because he was something happened in his life, etc. And he just like shut off, and we couldn't get a hold of him. He was making changes every time. He was giving you promises, then pretending it never happened, like
so
every retrograde stuff.
Him. So the cockatoo parrot was living with this man with the retrograde Jupiter. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
He was the owner. He was
owner of the
not
parrot.
so it was the zoo-like place with lots of birds. Now we finally the bird is like safe, and even we have saved another one. But I was so I don't know. I was angry because every horary chart was again retrograde Jupiter opposite something. I was like but inside I was like, as astrologer, I was happy because it shows me the thing, although I cannot give any clue like dates or answers. But I was happy because it shows that we have troubles ahead.
Working.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this will be it because we are so 1 hour and a half already. So maybe that's enough.
It's fantastic. It's been absolutely lovely speaking with you. So I will put a link to your website. Is it an easy website address to remember? I mean, I'll put a link on it.
Yeah, it's just my name and surname, so GregoryRozek.com.
Aha. Okay, you're .com, and you do the graphic design and astrology. So do you do one-on-one sessions with people? Is that how your astrology works? Okay, and they can book
Yeah.
you. Yes. Okay, great. We'll send some customers your way, hopefully.
Yeah.
So thank you
Hopefully
very
some.
much. Yeah, thank you
Okay.
very
Thank
much
you very much. It was
for talking
lovely
with us
speaking with
today.
you. Bye.
Yeah, nice to speak with you. Okay, bye-bye.